Hello, old lonesome. How are we today? And I see that old memory still stands in our way. Before long I'll be going where I have not yet been. Too young to be over, too old to begin. Too young to be over, too old to begin.
Taking the Samaritan House Poverty Challenge will leave you with an experience you'll remember for the rest of your life. It's not a fundraiser, it's a challenge. It's there to remind us of the struggles that are felt by individuals seeking help and assistance obtaining the basics of food, clothing, and shelter. Some approach it as a learning experience, and some approach it as a test. But one thing for sure, people agree that it is a humbling experience.
People are actually humbled by the experience, and I did the challenge this year and I was humbled by it as well. I see this every day, and still it had an impact on me, realizing how valuable the tubes of toothpaste that we can give to people really are. Things as simple as that so many people take for granted, and I think that's probably the biggest theme, is that the people who realized how fortunate they are and how much they take for granted and how wasteful we truly are with what we have. Samaritan House Brandon decided to do it 2 years ago, and we invited people to participate and live on $20 for a week to experience living in poverty. And we've just done another challenge in March of this year. People do need more money. They need more money simply for rent. People cannot afford their rent. We're doing the poverty challenge during the hunger count this year, and we are counting the number of people who are using food banks across the country right now until the end of March. We are asking questions about how much of your money is going to rent, and people are telling us 50%, 70%. People who are living on higher incomes are not having to expend all of their money just to have a place to live. These people are people on social assistance. If they're not in rent-controlled housing, then they are actually paying, some of them are paying 75 to 100% of their income just to have a place to live. The numbers of families who are 2 to a household has increased this year. So if we don't give them an increase in the social assistance rates for things that are that basic, then yeah, we're doing a huge disservice to our entire community. The other piece of that in terms of actual money is making sure that social assistance rates are keeping up with the cost of living, so that rates that are now haven't changed since 1993, there's no way that people can afford to live on that. Even a basic increase annually to ensure that people are somewhere close to a minimum living level. There's no expectation that the social assistance rate is supposed to keep people at it's not even close to the low income cutoff that many people refer to as living in poverty. It's not even close to that. But to at least increase it annually so that people have access to a minimum income. But the most important piece of that is to support people in the process of getting off assistance. There are not a lot of people who want to spend their entire life on assistance and not have access to other opportunities. But the Poverty Challenge is one place where people learn why it is that people end up in that situation where they stop trying, because they don't have the resources, they don't have the capacity, and it doesn't take long before they don't have the will to try and get off assistance.
Glen Kruck has worked with low-income families and individuals in need for a number of years now. Glen, of course, has heard of experiences from people trying to get basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter, but he had never really experienced it himself firsthand for an extended period of time. Glen decided to take the Samaritan House Poverty Challenge for 2008. And although he had done it once before a few years ago for a short week, this was going to be different, because this was going to be for 1 full month. Glen talked with Marion Robinsong at his new apartment late one evening and gave her an update of how he was feeling and what had expired in the weeks before. But before we hear that, Glen sets the stage for us and reveals what it was like at that very beginning, and he explains his approach towards doing the Samaritan House Poverty Challenge.
When we, the Canadian Mental Health Association, started to do this, accepted the Samaritan House Poverty Challenge, we wanted to make it as realistic as possible. So what we did, because we serve a lot of homeless individuals, we picked the scenario of a homeless individual who had nothing to begin with, coming into one of the emergency homeless units and then going on employment and income assistance. So what we did is I had one of my workers contact employment and income assistance to find out what the individual would be entitled to. Well, the first worker of mine came back and said, well, the individual employment and income assistance here in Brandon said that they're not entitled for anything. No special needs, like no table, chairs, nothing. In fact, they weren't even entitled to a bed and bedding, according to the first worker that was contacted. So we went out and rented the cheapest apartment that we could find, and this is it. It's a bachelor apartment. It's very small, but it's clean and it's a nice, safe location. This is the cheapest apartment we could find. It comes in at $394 per month, plus hydro. Social assistance for an employable individual will only pay $271 plus hydro. So there's a lot of difference there, which we have to use our food money and clothing money and personal needs money to cover the difference. So that's the way we set up this apartment. That's all we have is bed and bedding, nothing else. They also said if I was seriously looking for work, I would have a radio, so I have a clock radio. So it's a very, very stark environment. We ended up, even pots and dishes, all that had to come out of my food budget, which is very, very small at this point in time, because after paying for the rent and a $10 allotment to pay for the damage deposit, which is not covered by employment and income assistance, because they only will cover $135.50. But my damage deposit came in at a lot higher than that. It came in at $197. So after paying for rent and paying for $10 towards the unfunded amount of my damage deposit, paying for a few meager pots, a pot and some dishes, it means that I have about $1.86 left per day to live on. So that's the way we set up the apartment.
We were all excited to hear about Glen taking on the poverty challenge for an entire month. But the way he was thinking, we weren't so sure that he'd be able to get through to the very end. I was interested in how it was going, and so one evening I dropped in to talk with Glen about it. I asked Glen how close was he going to run his finances that month during the poverty challenge to what a person would actually have if he were on social assistance.
Well, we're doing it identical, and it worked. Like, I cut out all clothing money. I'm only spending $2.30 on hygiene, which means I've cut out shaving, and I've cut out toothpaste, and I've cut out mouthwash, dish detergent, tons of things. And the reason for that is because when you have such a small amount of money left over, and which is only about $2 a day, I don't view items with regards to a dollar figure anymore. Like toothpaste is a loaf of bread. You know, mouthwash is 2 loaves of bread.
Oh, you're comparing what it could be in terms of food, because the food has to be a high priority.
Exactly, and even doing that, reducing my personal needs to dental floss, a bar of soap, and a roll of toilet paper. I am still hungry all the time because I'm basically losing a pound for every 2 or 3 days, a pound of weight, and that is maximizing the cheapest food that I can buy according to some very, very basics of the Canada Food Guide.
So you know you're losing. Did you weigh in at the beginning of the month before you started?
Yes. I weighed in at 168 and a half. 20 days later I was at 160. So yeah.
Here we are on the 25th day of the month, and you may be lower than that even now.
Oh, I absolutely am, because even though I rationed out all my food, in 25 days you get those, I need something, so you cut a little bit into your future rations, So, so the rations in this last week are very slim. And like tomorrow I run out of peanut butter completely, so it's just dry bread after that point in time.
Oh my, that sounds like you're feeling some of those real crunches that people must feel. Did you anticipate that before you got started?
Well, I knew that hunger was going to be an issue. I absolutely knew that. Because people are having to pay so much of their food money for rent. I'll give you an example. Before going on this poverty challenge, I'd be eating, sunflower flax bread or stone milled bread, which is $2.49 a loaf. But I don't have that luxury anymore, so I have to go with the cheapest bread, because bread makes up 80% of my diet. And it's $1.29 a loaf. Same thing with eggs. I'd like to, before going on this poverty challenge, I'd like to get free-range eggs, but you just can't afford that anymore. So you have to get your most inexpensive eggs possible, because eggs is what makes up my protein, because I cannot afford meat. The other thing, again trying to live according to the Canada Food Guide, is the pricing of milk, which is very, very important for calcium and also for protein. And you have to be very, very careful. I remember when I purchased milk before, I accidentally bought one from here rather than from here, so it cost me a 30-cent difference. 30 cents difference for me meant that at the end of the month I was not able to purchase 1 loaf of bread, because that's exactly what I was short by having made that mistake. The other part, according to the Canada Food Guide, is mixed vegetables. So again, you need to look for the most inexpensive, like peas and carrots is by far the cheapest. And even though, you'd like to get some California mixed stuff for a change, but the price, this is a dollar more expensive than the peas and carrots. And further than that, this has got half the weight. So you're very, very limited, because there really is no option. You have to get the cheapest for vegetables. And you sure can't afford canned. vegetables or fresh fruit on this at $2 a day. So just the reality is the reality. Now the other aspect I need is I got to find some peanut butter. Now the peanut butter, again, an important aspect. One of the for protein and also for regards to fat content. So we're trying to get things without trans fats, but you don't have that luxury anymore. It's the concept as to whether or not you have products which contain trans fats, which are cheaper products, or you go without trans fats, and which are cost you more, which means you're going without food. So either concept is unhealthy. Going without food is unhealthy, and eating trans fats is unhealthy. But it's just you're forced to make those decisions. And in my case, I've decided I'll go with trans fats, and so I can eat. One of the other things that I've started to do is usually before going on this poverty challenge, I'd look at the nutritional.
Curtis call 45, please. Curtis call 45.
I'd look at the nutritional facts on the side of a container to look for things with low calories. But with my food intake being very limited, I'm actually looking at the nutritional to find things which are high in calories because, again, with having very little food, I need as many calories as possible. So this is really the essence of what I've been eating for the month. Bread, eggs for the protein, peanut butter, mixed vegetables, and a glass of milk each day. That's all I can afford. The other piece which is really off my shopping list is deodorant. You just can't afford it. If anything that you spend comes off your food budget. So much money is coming off the food budget right now in order to pay for rent. So the food budget then takes money away from personal hygiene items. And that's just a pecking order. That's just the way it goes. So deodorant's off the shopping list. Some things that we take for granted, people on very fixed incomes just have no options. One of the things I gave up during this month is dishwashing soap. I cannot afford it. So I wash my dishes with hot water, period. I cannot afford any soap, laundry soap at all. And in fact, on social assistance, the budget for people who are looking for work, the province does not fund any money for doing laundry. So in my mind, that makes no sense at all. People are trying to look for work. You need to be presentable looking for work. But if you cannot afford laundry soap or laundry money to wash your clothes in machines, it's very, very difficult. It's such a small amount of money. I think the province should change that. One of the problems I realized early on in doing this challenge is that toothpaste, even your cheapest toothpaste, it'll cost you a loaf of bread. Mouthwash costs you almost 2 loaves of bread. So because I have to live on $2 a day, it's a decision whether you use mouthwash or toothpaste or whether you eat. So during this challenge, my only piece with regards to dental hygiene has been to buy some dental floss, and that is all. Boy, sure would be nice to be able to afford some socks, I tell you. Clothes, this whole month, there's no money spent on clothes. Zero. There just isn't any money. On this challenge too, another thing that occurred to me is whenever I come across a food bank donation bin, I'd always grab something to put into it. And this time I realized, one, I don't have anything to put into it, because anything that I take out of here to put in here means I'm going without that for that month. And further than that, it occurred to me that this food bank is for individuals on social assistance such as myself. So it's quite a realization when you're suddenly on the receiving end instead of on the giving end.
When you have to be so controlled, really, and not give in to any impulses, you might say, I wondered if there were times when you just felt that it was hard to keep going, and you wondered whether you would get to the end of the month.
Absolutely. The first week was very much the hardest. Well, the first and now the last week is very much the hardest because I'm running out of stuff. But the first week, because I was so accustomed to eating lots of food, and heck, I'd be eating out at restaurants most of the time, and my tip would be $2. You know, now I'm living off that tip money. So that was quite a shock to my system in the first week. But it impacts so much on your life. Like, you know, you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're hungry. You wake up hungry, and you're trying to go back to sleep, but you're hungry. So you're not getting a good night's sleep, so the next day you're dragging your butt at work, sort of idea. And that's all because of lack of food. But there's a lot of other things which are even harder. I can't say harder, but, well, probably as hard. Say, for example, I got my sister-in-law informed me that my nephew was coming into town to play at a jazz festival. And this is the first time ever, and he's playing at a jazz festival.
And so, there's an entry fee. I'm thinking this is where you're going.
Well, the piece is, I didn't know if there was an entry fee or not. And I was just panic-stricken. I was just stressed out. I thought to myself, well, you know, I've got, at that stage I had $7, almost $8 left, because I hadn't bought all my groceries yet. So I thought, you know, if it's $5, I can afford that, because that means I go 2.5 days without eating. I can do that. But if it's a $10 admission fee, that's 5 days without eating anything. And so I was going like, wow, that's going to be hard. And so when I went there just praying that there wasn't going to be an admission fee, and I walked up to the spot where it was supposed to be at, and there was a lady sitting there with a cash box. And I go, I'm toast, you know, just what is it going to be? And she said, no, that's the wrong spot. It's just down the hall.
What an experience. And then you'll have to tell us the end of the story, though. What happened down the hall?
Down the hall, there was no cash box. It was free, but just this relief, this huge relief. Yeah. But that was only one situation.
The tension and the emotional struggles that you went through thinking about that.
And I'm only doing this for 31 days. You know, people live on assistance for a long period of time. 60% of the individuals renting in the private marketplace right now are disabled individuals. They are living this
month after month,
year after year, decade after decade. And these situations happen all the time. Prior to going on the challenge, a friend of mine took me out for a beer, and he informed me he's going in for a bone marrow transplant at the Health Sciences Center. So another situation, like someone's going into a very serious situation where he's going to be in a hospital for 5 to 6 weeks, and right off the bat, I know for 4 of those weeks, I cannot see that individual. If I try, I'd have to hitchhike in, maybe get to the outskirts of Winnipeg, and then walk, 15 miles to get to the Health Sciences Center. Then by the time I do that, most of the day would be spent, where am I going to sleep so I can try and return it? So like the difficulties placed on individuals.
It's true. A lot of things are just outside the scope of what you can even consider.
Like I work with the Canadian Mental Health Association, and I was lucky to find this apartment at 394 Plus Hydro because our association in the next week was looking for an apartment for a lady who was part of our program, and the cheapest they could find was $475 that was available. $475. So, that's dramatically more than what I'm paying. So it's just beyond belief.
There must be almost nothing left out of that.
Almost nothing left. Almost nothing left at all.
So you have had experience enough to know that you had a stroke of good luck to find this apartment, really.
Well, when we found this one in the paper and it was available, I didn't even come to see it. I said I'd take it because I didn't want to lose it. Because if I didn't have this one, my budget would have even been a whole lot tighter. And this is as tight as I personally can go. I think I'll make the 31 days, but it's a struggle. There are 2 things that really bother me. One is this provincial government, which is not paying for the basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter. Not paying for that. And they know they're not paying for that. The other part, we've been advocating for basic food, clothing, and shelter through the Canadian Mental Health Association, who I work for a lot of years now.
Yes.
And sometimes I'll get an irate caller from the community who will ream me out saying, why the hell are you doing that? Those people need to just go out and get a job, And so I talk to the individual and I say, well, you say these people need to go out and get a job. Well, okay, so 60% are disabled. The highest paid medical profession has determined this individual is either physically or psychiatrically incapable of working. Right off the bat, those individuals cannot get a job. Cannot. At least not a full-time job where they can own their own keep. Okay? Right off the bat. Number 2, 26% of individuals renting in the private marketplace are single parents with kids under the age of 6. Again, there's not a work expectation because their work expectation is to take care of that child until they get into the school system. So,
and their daycare is very hard to find.
Extremely hard to find, especially subsidized daycare.
Yeah.
Those spots are very, very rare spots. So right off the bat, you're looking at 86% cannot just go out and say, well, I'll just go out and get a job kind of thing. The other aspect on that leaves only 14%, which is termed general assistance. 14% of individuals in the employable category. Of those individuals, a good half of those individuals, or more, are disabled.
Yeah.
They're disabled.
But they don't want folks to know, or they don't want to have the letter that says they are, or they don't want to just take that final step to
Exactly.
admit that.
There's that stigma attached to mental illness, so they refuse to see a psychiatrist to get that label. We served 90 homeless individuals last year, and some of those individuals who were termed employable were the most sickest individuals we've seen. People who are outside, are falling through the cracks in the system, but who are extremely disabled. And then you have a number, so about half of those fall into that category. So now we're only looking at 7%. Of those remaining 7% who are deemed employable, you have individuals who have, for a variety of reasons, our employers would not readily hire those individuals because they have very, very limited skills. Some can't read, and there's a whole variety of things. Some with personality disorders, which don't classify as a psychiatric diagnosis, but still have things which make a work environment very difficult. So you have very, very few individuals who are actually employable, who are still on social assistance. Very few.
Do you know how many years it's been since there's been a raise in the basic general amount? I understand it's been quite a long time.
Well, in the general assistance category, there has not been an increase in the shelter allowance rate since 1993.
That's a tremendous long time when you consider that even rent regulation and so on has allowed the percentage of the increase over that time.
20%.
Wow.
So the government has allowed rents to go up 20% and not funded that for the most vulnerable individuals. The piece on that, you've got to bear in mind, we're talking about the most vulnerable individuals.
Yes.
We're talking about people who 98% will not show up on camera. 98% will not talk in public because they're too embarrassed. So in a sense, it's a very easy population to ignore their basic needs because they will not come at you. And they will not come at you in a public fashion because they do not want to be identified.
Glen, earlier we were talking about you having done the Poverty Challenge once before, so I'm not too sure why you got into doing this again, or is this one different in some ways?
Well, the first time I did it was only for a week, and that was a couple of years ago. And that was a learning experience. I had $20 to live on
Yes.
for the week. Now,
This one is a month.
Well, let me get back to one experience though that happened though in that first week
Sure.
though. The going without the food part was difficult because that was very much a reduced budget. But at that point in time, I remember having to sell my food in order so I'd have change to call my daughter who's living in Ottawa. And to literally having to go to a neighbor and saying, you know, I'd like to sell you 3 loaves of bread. You know, it's kind of embarrassing to do that. But I did that, and I called my daughter from a payphone, and she put me on hold.
Oh,
Well,
no.
3 loaves of bread buys you 25 seconds, you know, on a payphone. And by the time she came back, I was gone. But it's just so, the isolation from family was very, 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 very hard. But that was only for a week, so I wanted to try this for a full month. It's what I really wanted to do.
See what kind of endurance was needed for a full month, I'm guessing.
You get a better experience for it, but even that is, this month is 31 days. Some of these people are living on it for decades.
It's true.
Because they're disabled and that's their only
Well, just
source.
in these, well, you're nearly finished your 31 days, but still 6 days to go. And have you noticed lifestyle changes, you might say? Or how are you getting around? I'm thinking no car.
No car, no. It's all foot power, that's for sure.
Then that takes more time, so you'll probably have to think out what you're doing and how you're going to get there.
It not only takes more time, but it takes a lot more energy. And with reduced food, you are having less energy. So even towards the end of the month, I'm noticing my pace is becoming slower because I'm starting to drag. the other part that was quite a shocker is like I only have so much clothes, which I purchased from a thrift store, 3 changes of clothing. And not being able to afford to shave and dressed in thrift clothes, because that's all I could afford, is your perception of yourself changes dramatically. And I noticed myself doing things like walking home. I'd walk down a one-way street with traffic, so cars weren't seeing me. They'd see my back because I was embarrassed of my appearance. Or there was a friend, an old friend that I wanted to say hi to in a grocery store, and about 8 steps away I turned away.
Isn't that something? And just in the short time you're feeling those feelings for yourself. Just
Embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have junk of mouth because I can't afford toothpaste, I can't afford mouthwash. So like, it's just...
So what about friends? Has this experience on limited money and limited ability to contact people, has it influenced your interactions with friends?
Well, I'll show you my budget left over after spending my money on $2.30 left that I spent on hygiene and the rest on food, and I'm still losing a pound for every day or two, every 2 or 3 days. So I've got 8 cents left.
6 days to go.
6 days to go.
8 cents left. Oh,
So
it looks
maybe
like
I
you've
could
got
do,
an extra
sorry,
something.
9 cents.
9 cents left.
9 cents left. So I could maybe spend 4 cents on recreation, do something with a friend, and maybe I could save the other nickel and maybe buy half of a sock at a thrift shop.
Wow. It sounds like you strongly feel the limitations of the finances.
When you go to a checkout, and you hope you've done your math right. Because you don't have another $5 in your pocket to pay for those groceries. I was 9 cents was all I had left. So you go to a checkout when there's no one behind you, because you don't know who's going to be behind you if you have to return something.
Glenn, it's probably a good idea that people get to know whether we're having coffee or tea or what is exactly in these cups when you're working on such a low budget.
Hot water.
Hot water.
Pure hot water, because I can't afford tea, chocolate, coffee, nothing. It's just hot water.
Well, I've enjoyed it, to be honest, but I can see
It's
that's about as sparse as it can come.
Well, it's a great flavor, a great blend, yes.
Brandon has good water.
Yes, the chlorine mixture is just right.
Just right, yeah. There was another thing that occurred to me, though, was I think I remember us meeting downtown. We just met by accident, and a couple of days after you started, and you weren't sure what you would be able to bring here for furnishings. And you got that figured out, I understand.
Well, it took a long time to figure that out, because in renting the apartment, I wanted to walk the walk for 31 days as to what an individual, on general assistance would be entitled to. So, first time coming onto assistance, we needed to find that out.
So, in other words, you were asking, what if this was your first time coming onto assistance? And I'm thinking you're really putting yourself in the position of you have no family here to help you. For some reason, you're here, you're alone in Brandon, and nothing more than a knapsack maybe that you've brought on the bus.
That's exactly the case. I had 3 changes of clothes in a backpack, and starting off exactly like that.
So what did you end up doing? I see there is some furniture here. It's very nice, actually.
Well, I need to talk about the start, though,
Yes.
because we served 90 homeless individuals last year
At Canadian Mental
at
Health.
the Canadian Mental Health Association through our emergency homeless units. I had one of my workers ask a worker at Employment and Income Assistance, not saying it was me, but saying they had an individual, you know, from similar circumstances, and they're ready to move on, and what are they entitled to for special needs? And the first worker said nothing. He said the individual was entitled to anything, and that after 3 months on assistance, they'd be entitled to a bed and bedding. After
It's
3
a long
months.
time to wait, even assuming the person got an apartment. That's a long time to wait for a bed and a sheet or two and a blanket.
Exactly, exactly. A very, very long time. But some of the homeless individuals we served, that's exactly the way they left our place, with nothing. No furniture. So I thought to myself, okay, well, moving into this no-bed apartment, no-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
I would have to have a coat and use that to sleep, for my quilt, and maybe roll up a pair of pants for a pillow. But I wanted to be sure that I was doing that correctly. So I had another worker contact Employment and Income Assistance, and he came up with a different answer. He said that worker said I was entitled to a bed and bedding, but nothing else. And that worker said she hadn't seen any special needs provided to anyone who was employable for several years already. So I thought, okay, well, great, I got a
Bed and bedding, that was a
bedding.
start.
Starting, yeah. But I needed to find out which one was correct, because I had 2 different messages from 2 different workers in the same office. So I contacted the head of the department, and he said something even better. He said, no, you are entitled to a bed and bedding, and also because it's your first time on assistance, you know, without the family support kind of thing, you're also entitled to $500.
Wow, that must have felt like an enormous windfall at that point.
An enormous, because I was initially started here with just a mattress and bedding. So, you know, you have no table or chair, you know, you're trying to do some paperwork or what have you, and you're always bending over on a bed, and it was so isolated. It didn't have a clock or clock radio, so you know, you didn't have a TV, so the isolation was like solitary confinement. I thought the isolation was going to do me in before the food was.
Isn't that something? So how far did the $500 go when you started to get a few things?
It was like Christmas. You know, I've got a table, a couple of chairs.
Couple of chairs here.
Yeah, a shower curtain. I've got plates, you know, some pots, a toaster. Oh, I love my toaster. You know, when 80% of my food is bread, at least I can add some variety to it. I can make some of it crunchy. You know, I was able to get a second-hand TV and a second-hand dresser. You know, a lamp. You know, still I don't have a whole lot of things. Like I don't have an armchair. I don't have a couch. I don't have places to put it in here anyways. And there's a lot of things I'm still doing without. I don't have a dish rack. There's a lot of things, but at least it gave me the very, very basics. And I cannot thank that department head, not only for clarifying it for me, but also he sent an email out to all his frontline workers to be sure that they were giving out the correct message now. And that was very, very important.
Imagine that's going to be one of the positive things that you take away from this experience this month. Were there any other positive experiences that you can think of?
Everything else has basically been stress. Hunger and stress.
You wanted to walk the walk, and you're finding out that there aren't many positive things along that walk.
No, you sure do learn to appreciate things like not being able to afford a newspaper. Well, when the free, community newspapers come, like once a week, you read that thing from cover to cover, because you got nothing to read. So you appreciate things that I took for granted. Very much so. Things you just wouldn't assume. Like, who would think that brushing your teeth was a luxury? Who would think that?
Generally thought of to be a chore.
Yeah. Or even dish soap. I can't afford dish soap. So, you know,
What do you do?
Well, I'm washing my dishes with hot water, but, you know, at what point in time will those dishes not be clean anymore, is the question.
What about cleaning your clothes too?
Well, I have a bar of soap, because in the general assistance category, you are not funded for laundry. So even though I've got laundry machines right across the hall, that's where the laundry room is, I've got no money for those machines.
Your 9 cents wouldn't likely go far enough.
No, those machines don't take pennies or nickels. And so, you know, it's good that there's a wash tub right next there. But, you know, I can't afford laundry soap, so I have to use that one bar of soap that I'm using for personal hygiene. It's my shampoo, it's for washing myself, and in addition, it's for scrubbing my clothes. But think on it. After you scrub your clothes in the wash sink and you have to wring them out, so after you wring them out, you know, without an iron or an ironing board for ironing your clothes, you know, the next several days until they get worn in, you just look like a mess. You're just all wrinkled. And that's the way you're supposed to go looking for a job? That makes no sense at all. That makes no sense at all. And the fact that they don't fund a telephone. How is an employer supposed to contact you for an interview?
That's a tough situation. We'll talk even
I need
about
to interrupt you for a second, because it's bringing up another piece.
Yeah.
I went for the interview with because before you get on social assistance, you have to go for the interview, the orientation interview. And that experience was interesting. It was too much information, especially when you're hungry. And when you don't have a notepad to write down that you have to bring this, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. So
as I have right here, just to take a note or two while we're talking.
Exactly. That, any workshops I go to, they always provide a pen and paper. Well, there was no pen and paper, and it's a lot of information in a short period of time. And also when you're hungry, it's kind of, you know, in my head I was just saying, I need food is what I need, okay? I don't need all these regulations. I don't need all this other stuff. I need money for food. But the other aspect, at the end of it, they tell you, well, you have to go to the front desk, and the front desk at reception will give you a card as to who your worker is. And then once you have that card, you leave, and your responsibility is to phone that worker, leave a message on their answering machine, asking them to phone you back with an appointment
Isn't that in
time.
Congress? Isn't that in Congress when you don't have funds for a phone?
Exactly. And the system who's not funding you for a phone
It's
is telling you to phone and leave a message on the phone, and they will call you back on a phone that you don't have.
Something tells me you're going to have quite a bit of advice to pass on once this is over.
Well, first thing I will do is share it with the program supervisor here locally, because he has been absolutely outstanding. You know, he clarified with regards to the special needs money, but unless you're walking the walk, a lot of things like this are easy to not see. Like even myself, I'm in charge of an organization. We provided services to 90 homeless individuals. I thought all those individuals were getting furniture and clothing when they were leaving. That's what I thought.
Yes.
They weren't. Until I did this and was talking directly to my frontline workers, I didn't know there was this huge gap. So part of it is people just not knowing how the system is not connected, how it's disjointed it is.
That's a huge benefit to folks like yourself taking on the poverty challenge. I give you a lot of credit for setting yourself up for a month and actually seeing what really does happen. So can I ask you again, were there any surprises? I'm wondering, did you manage to maintain some of the things that mattered to you in your lifestyle before? some of the things you thought you really would like to keep in your life?
I got nothing. I got nothing. Like, you don't have internet access. You don't have a phone. You don't have a newspaper, so you're isolated as to what's going on in the community. Anything that costs an admission is just impossible.
Well, you've said, Glenn, that money, just having no access to any extra money makes it hard to keep in touch with friends. Did you find that you could carry on with your friendships or with other things that matter to you in your life?
Well, it's hard without a phone. You know, if you want to see a friend...
How do you make arrangements, eh?
Yeah, and a friend's halfway across town, so you don't know if that individual's home, so, you know, you either walk all the way down there or use the off-peak bus pass and go all the way down there.
Taking a chance.
Taking the chance, knocking on a door, arriving unexpected, and the other person's going to be home or not going to be home, and then you come all the way back, so it's that really hit and miss. It's very, very difficult.
I just want to add something, Glenn. I'm not sure, well, I am sure that you've noticed, but I get the idea that your apartment is set up so that when someone buzzes you from the door, you need to actually have a phone installed here for you to open the door. And that, I'm thinking that must have been why you came right down to the door to let us in today.
Exactly. I can't even let someone into this place. I have people knock on my window. Is the only
because
way.
You wouldn't hear a sound from the door.
No, but if I was on the second or third floor, people couldn't even do that. Yeah. So it even further isolates you without a phone. It's a very good point.
But you just briefly mentioned the off-peak bus passes. Have you found that they're useful to you?
Very useful. That is something that the City of Brandon is doing very, very excellently. And that's in conjunction with the provincial government, because the provincial government is funding it. But anyone on assistance is entitled to the off-peak bus pass. And what I love about it is not only can you go to different places across town on buses which generally are not filled to capacity, far below capacity, but when you use it, and when I used it, you know, the driver welcomed me on the bus just like anyone else. I didn't feel embarrassed, so I didn't feel snubbed in any way, and so it was a very welcoming environment. So that part, the transit drivers are doing a really good job on that.
I was thinking about needing to buoy up your hopefulness, and also linking it in with the experience that others have when they stay on month after month, and as you say, even year after year on assistance. What would you need to keep your spirits up, to keep you going, do you think?
Well, first off, we need to change the track that this government's going on right now, because every year that they do not fund the very basics of housing costs, and housing prices are just going through the roof, it means that they're shifting more and more of a burden on that individual, and so it's making it harder for that individual to exist. Harder. So they're destroying hope. The other thing that the government very much is doing is they are offloading their responsibilities onto not-for-profits.
Yes, I think maybe you want to say a little bit more about how you approach this particular month of your poverty challenge in regard to the things like food banks and Salvation Army and things like that. Did you have in mind, I'm pretty sure you spoke about having in mind attempting to manage this month on the social assistance alone?
Exactly. Exactly. Without using, Helping Hands, Soup Kitchen, or Samaritan House, their food bank, or CMHA's furniture warehouse. So the purpose was to find out how adequate the provincial social assistance rates are right now. And they are so in people renting in the private marketplace, very survival is in jeopardy without using not-for-profits. So the provincial government, the government that we elect and support, is not providing the most fundamental basic needs for the most vulnerable citizens to survive without
With
the
some
assistance.
dignity.
With some dignity. And that is very difficult to accept.
Hello, lonesome. How are we today? And I see that old memory still stands in our way. Before long I'll be going where I have not yet been. Too young to be over, too old to begin. Too young to be over, too old to begin.